In July of 2007, I made a decision that changed my life. But before that, I have to tell you about another decision that was made. About a year before, a man wrote a blank check to the U.S. Army, one that could take all of his time and even his life. He signed that check not knowing what was going to happen in his future, and he signed it because of several unknowns that were going on in his life at the time. A few months later, he and I reconnected, and according to my dad, after only 3 days, we got married. That is not the whole story. So I co-signed his blank check, also not knowing what the future would hold, only knowing I wanted to spend our lives together. Now, sometimes our together looked a lot different than other newlyweds. News that we were expecting our first child was overshadowed by plans for a 15-month deployment. Since this was going to be his first child, the unit worked with him to schedule mid-tour leave for Dietrich's birth. At 11 days old, he had to return to duty. Ed would not hold his son again for 8 months. We spent our first anniversary on separate continents. Peter's first duty station was in Fort Carson in beautiful Colorado Springs. This distance was manageable for frequent trips to visit our family. My in-laws are halfway between, so that made that convenient as well. And we also really enjoyed exploring in our own backyard. While I was already fairly independent and strong-willed, that first year allowed me to develop those traits into strengths. Each unit has what is called a Family Readiness Group, or FRG. I had to look up what the defined purpose of these groups are because it wasn't my experience. The defined purpose is to encourage self-reliance for the members by providing information, referral assistance, and mutual support. And I'm sure there are groups out there that do function that way. What I observed was a group that was very gossipy, very much like a high school cafeteria. So I rarely felt informed, assisted, or supported. Instead, I decided to find my support through our church. Because of where we lived at the time, there were many military spouses, some closer to my age, some that were more like adopted grandparents. And each of them had something they could contribute to be supportive to me and my son. More than that, we shared a common belief and a common eternal perspective, which was a whole lot stronger than a current temporary situation in common. Peter remained stationed at Fort Carson for about 4 years. This included a second year-long deployment, few opportunities for promotion, and an unsupportive chain of command that would not help him with his officer candidate school application. He contacted the branch manager, and after much praying and waiting, while we were on post-deployment leave, the branch manager called him and said, "I've got a couple of opportunities. Which one do you want?" And one of those opportunities was Germany. So in October 2011, we set off on a new adventure. When we left the States, I was 8 weeks pregnant with our second child. But before we moved out of temporary housing, before our vehicle and household goods could arrive, we lost that baby. The unit offered their condolences and support, but we weren't even finished with our in-processing yet. We were granted an extra week in temporary housing, most of which I spent laying on the couch as Dietrich watched TV. I would occasionally get up so that I could feed him, which gave me the reason to take care of myself. And he became the bright spot in my darkness. We settled quickly in our new home and easily connected with our local military congregation. Once again, I gave the FRG a chance, and once again, I was disappointed. In the last meeting that I went to, my husband's first sergeant introduced himself to me for the third time. He says, "Oh, I don't think we've met." And I think the look on my face told him how wrong he was. And by this time, I was pregnant with Madeline. And Peter was already gone on his third deployment, which was a much shorter one, only 9 months. he was able to take leave from that assignment to welcome Madeline almost exactly a year after our loss. My favorite memory from this time, which you heard my dad say at the other, in the Veterans Day one, is, "You are Peter, you are my daddy, and you are not in a turkey anymore." My favorite memory of that time.
Yeah.
Peter's favorite memory is that Madeline peed on the doctor, who is a colonel. So once again, he returned to work, leaving an 11-day-old baby behind. However, this time he returned after only 3 months. We found more things to explore all over Europe than we had time to do. Before Madeline ever set foot on U.S. soil, she had been to 8 countries. In our 3 years in Germany, we made many new friends and said goodbye about 13 times because we were at the end of what's called a PCS cycle. So we said goodbye to all the people who had been at our church before we got there. Except in the military, you don't say goodbye. You say see you later. When our turn came, we did not know what the next thing was going to be. After 7.5 years of the consistently inconsistent military life, I again faced the unknown. My very empathetic and inquisitive Dietrich had picked up on how other people knew what their next thing was, and we had no clue. One day, he repeated back to my dad when we were on Skype what he'd heard me say numerous times. "We don't know where we're going, but God will point us in the right direction." Becoming an Army wife involved a commitment to my husband, to his mission, and to our country. This lifestyle is filled with unknowns, secret fears you don't talk about, and it reveals your character. I found new talents and strengths, learned more about relying on God, and developed a faith that was truly my own. And that is a nod to my favorite sermon that my dad has preached. Unbecoming an Army wife has been, if anything, more challenging. The military lifestyle becomes a part of your identity, and suddenly that piece that fits so perfectly didn't fit right anymore. And what no one talks about is how military life affects you long after your commitment is over. There are plenty of things I didn't need to know during deployments, some things that I would like to forget since I was told. But similarly, there were home situations that I didn't bother my husband with because he couldn't help, and they would distract him from his mission. This is the balance a military family deals with, each person trying not to tip the scale to preserve safety and sanity. We always made finding a church home a priority. These people gave us support, and we shared in each other's lives. Military life taught us valuable lessons. We learned how to be a family, even through separation. We learned how to make the most of our time together, and we found adventure in every situation. And even now, we carry those lessons with us.